Hey, what's up everybody in YouTube world? This is Barnun11970. Thank you for watching my video, and I hope you guys had a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, or whatever you decided to celebrate. Alright guys, we're getting a lot of talk around the mainstream media, from the YouTube media, even places like Facebook are really heavily debated into this whole thing about gun control. Now I'm going to show you guys an example of the illusion of the security when it comes to disarming a nation. Because basically what the media and the politicians out there are trying to do is basically take advantage of the fact that the average citizen will just believe what they're told on mainstream media without at least verifying and questioning it. And they're using people's fears to be able to pass laws that they will later on end up ultimately regretting. And that is the eventual banning of firearms and the abolishment of the Second Amendment. Now, most people say that won't happen. Well, in this country, that's probably right, because I can guarantee that if people found out tomorrow that guns were banned, how many people out there have that mentality of, you could pry the gun out of my dead hands? Now, I don't believe in guns, but I do believe in the right to own guns. And as a matter of fact, I've at least checked into the possibilities because of all this that is going on. And I've done a lot of research on it. And I want to mention to the people something out there that you may not know about. One of the safest countries to live, pretty much on the planet, if not the safest, would be Switzerland. Now, why is that? Well, most people will say, well, because they don't have a standing army, which is true. But what people don't realize is, any man that reaches the age of 18, under law, is required to not only go through militia training, but is required to own a fully automatic machine gun. This is a law in Switzerland. Now, most people, because of what you hear in the media and what you hear in the news, well, you would think that would be a very unsafe place to live, because all the citizens, male citizens, are mandatorily armed with machine guns. Fully automatic machine guns, by the way, which is the true definition of assault rifle. That's another lie the mainstream media gives you, is because they say because it looks like an assault rifle, they're saying it is. Basically what they're doing is this is how they program people. They say the same words over and over again, and then after a while, the average person associates all firearms with assault rifle. So they try and make it seem deadly. But like I said, you would think Switzerland would have a high homicide rate and a lot of deaths due to shootings. Well, that's actually not the case. In 2010 alone, and unfortunately I don't have the 2011 or 2012 statistics, in 2010, Switzerland had a total of 40 gun homicides. Now think about that. Every male citizen from the age of 18 and older is required to go through militia training, and is mandatory to own a fully automatic machine gun. So each citizen is basically the private militia of Switzerland to protect the motherland against any possible attacks. So you would think, well, the average person running around with a gun, you'd think there'd be more homicides, more deaths. Well, first of all, they're trained, and second of all, that is just not the case. But you will not hear this in the media because it goes against their agenda. And people really need to start understanding that there is an agenda that is being perpetrated here. Now, people will say, oh, well, they're only trying to ban assault rifles. Well, here's the other part of that lie. Because like I said before, the definition of an assault rifle is a fully automatic rapid-fire weapon used in the military. Those have been banned in the United States since 1930. So there are no assault rifles that are being sold unless you're some criminal who can get possession of illegal items. Obviously, a gun ban would not really affect those people whatsoever. So we have to understand, and I know my subscribers understand it, and people that watch YouTube frequently understand it, that the politics the media, all of these people, they all work together to program the average people, which are unfortunately the masses, into believing an agenda to get something passed. Now, some people, like I said, will say, well, they're only going to be banning semi-automatic weapons because they say, well, why do we need it? And some people will argue, the people in the media will say, well, the Second Amendment was made for hunting. No, it was not. The Second Amendment came along so this way the people can protect themselves against their own government if it ever became tyrannical. So the idea is to be able to have the public protect themselves against a tyrannical government by having basically the same type of weapons that their military would use. Now, when you see things like governments disarming the nations, they will eventually, and this doesn't happen all the time, but if you look at the history just in the 20th century, there tends to end up being genocide, where you disarm the nation, and then tyrannical governments can basically do what they want to the people. And there have been millions of deaths caused by genocide from disarmament of nations. And also the illusion of protection, because that's all it is. Because let me ask you something. Anybody out there who presently owns a legal gun, now I'm talking law-abiding citizens who either have gun permits or have things like rifles and shotguns where you don't need a permit, but you are a legal, law-abiding citizen, never had jail records, and you're legally allowed to own a gun. How many of you go out on shooting sprees? I sincerely doubt the average person who is a law-abiding citizen goes around doing crazy things like what happened in Aurora, Colorado, and what happened in Connecticut, and anywhere else where there are homicides. You notice there is a trend. Well, it's criminals that do the activity. You cannot blame the tool that they choose to use, because there are several people who have died via drunk driving accidents, via beatings. There have been people who've gotten into fights or they choked somebody. There have been people who have died from stab wounds. So you cannot blame the tool. You blame the person behind it, the criminal, and what caused them to get to that point. But if you notice in the media and the people that are trying to ban guns, even on YouTube, they talk about the gun as if somehow the gun got out of a gun shelf or a store or a locked closet, went out on its own, and went on a killing spree. They don't seem to realize that the gun is nothing more than a tool. And they use the fear of the general public, because that is the majority, to make them, first of all, be fed with misinformation and sometimes flat-out lies to perpetrate their agenda. So look up the term assault rifle, and you'll notice the mainstream media loves using that term. And there have been interviews, like I saw an interview today, I saw a bunch of them, but I saw one with Ted Nugent, and somebody was saying in their argument, well, it looks like an assault rifle. Well, you know, just because something looks like something doesn't mean that's what it is. I mean, that's like saying you bought a fake, whatchamacallit, what kind of purse? A fake, I don't have purses, I don't know a top brand. But let's say, just think of a fancy purse name, and you bought an imitation. Does that mean it has the same value? Absolutely not. You know, that's like taking a Toyota and putting a Mercedes emblem on it, and you make it look like a Mercedes. Well, that doesn't mean that it's a Mercedes. So my point is, we all have to realize that we're being fed misinformation because there is an ultimate agenda. Yes, they may start out by just banning semi-automatic weapons, but I guarantee you, if that law is passed, they will continue on further and further down the line until they finally convince the people that there should be gun bans altogether. And then, bad things can happen. I'm not saying if they disarm the nation, that automatically our government would become tyrannical and start causing genocide. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, if you go throughout history, that is a possibility. Do you want to be one of those citizens in a country that happens to have that happen? Potentially, I would not risk it. That is not a gamble worth taking. So people need to educate themselves, and that's why people need to understand that we are ultimately responsible for what we allow our quote-unquote representatives to do. So while we sit back and do nothing, while we sit back and get information that is inaccurate and sometimes flat-out lies, if we choose to just openly believe what we're told just because it's said by someone with a suit and tie, well, then we are ultimately responsible in the long run, because when we decide to do nothing, it is our fault. That is why people like myself and others make videos about this and try our best to enlighten people. Now, that doesn't mean we are 100% right. That does not mean we do not make mistakes or get things wrong. But we're not out there purposely trying to lie to people to deceive the public. There's a difference between getting wrong information and flat-out lying. Unfortunately, there are people in the world that make quick accusations and quick judgments about people, and they turn it into something bigger than it really is. So we need to understand that they are trying to take away your constitutional rights. Where do they stop? I mean, let's put it in perspective. They tried to take alcohol away in the 1930s by the Prohibition movement. That created more crime. That created the parts of the mafia. You know, remember the Valentine's Day Massacre? That happened basically in a direct or indirect response of what was going on at that time. To the point where the people spoke enough and there was too much crime and they couldn't stop the alcohol from coming in, that they actually abolished that amendment. I mean, look at the war on drugs. You could get drugs anywhere you want. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. If they have all these laws that are supposed to prevent these things, and they can't even stop drugs and alcohol from even entering prisons, then you know they are not going to keep you safe. So there is more to it than protection of the people. Because if you study history, you prevent yourself from repeating it. Because Hitler, when he disarmed his nation, started out the same way by saying they were disarming the citizens to protect them. Well, if you ask any Jewish person that escaped the concentration camps that are still alive today to remember that tragedy, I guarantee you if they had a crystal ball in the beginning and knew what was going on, they would have done more. So, like I said, I'm not saying governments, just because they disarm the people, automatically become tyrannical. I'm not saying that just because they disarm a nation that they are trying to create genocide. But, can it happen? Absolutely. Do you want to take the chance? Well, that's ultimately up to you. So for all the people out there who do believe in our God-given rights and our Constitution, and do believe in the right to bear arms for protection against a tyrannical government and not just for hunting, let's hear what you have to say. Like I said, guys, I don't really believe in guns. I consider myself more of a pacifist. If I wanted to settle something with somebody, I would rather settle it with my fist than, well, then I guess I wouldn't really be a pacifist. I guess I'd have to think of a better term. But I don't want to think about going around shooting people as a solution to a problem. I would first want to speak to them and talk to them and communicate. And if that doesn't work, a one-to-one fight would pretty much solve it. I don't believe in bringing weapons into a fight. To me, that says less about being a man than somebody that needs that. But guns are there to protect us from military gone rogue. And if you look throughout history, and even today, there are dictators, there are people who are not kind to their citizens. And if you cannot defend yourself, well, then you're at the mercy of those people, aren't you? So it's something to think about. So I want to know what people think about it. And like I said, this is coming from a person who doesn't believe in guns, but I definitely believe in the right to defend our very freedoms from the very government trying to disarm us. And they're not doing it for the safety of the people. That is the illusion. That is the lie. How long are you willing to wait until you realize, uh-oh, I made a big mistake by allowing our government and other governments throughout the world to just slowly take our rights away, one pluck at a time. So thanks for watching, guys. Let's hear your opinion. Be safe out there. Have a happy new year. And remember, guys, be good to one another. Peace.